Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the TED in Your Head podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am your host, Ted Moreno, certified hypnotherapist and high performance coach. And I've been doing this for over 20 years, basically helping people with the everyday challenges of life. What do I mean by that? Using the tool of hypnosis, I help people to be more motivated, exercise more, get along better with their spouse, with their kids, enjoy life more. Get rid of bad habits like smoking or drinking too much. All the things that we all deal with in life, or at least most of us deal with these kind of things, right? How do I be happier? How do I let go of past resentments? How do I stop from being so sad? How do I get myself more motivated to do better at my job? All of those things are things that I work with people with. And if any of those sound interesting to you, I'll tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of the show. For now, let's get into today's podcast. Remember what you don't want to think about. Memento Mori. So I went for a long walk this morning. It was a beautiful morning, cool with a nice breeze. There it was fresh, and the view of the San Gabriel Mountains near my home was clear and just very beautiful. We've got this beautiful fall weather going on here. I just celebrated my 21st wedding anniversary. I've got a kid in college now and one getting ready to graduate in high school, graduate from high school. I'm 64 years old. And I guess the change in the season happening right now and the feel of winter on the doorstep just made me feel a bit pensive. While I was out taking my walk, I started thinking back over my life, thinking about my young years growing up here in Southern California, thinking about my 20 years living and growing up in Tucson, Arizona, and then coming back to Southern California 24 years ago to get married, raise a family, start a hypnotherapy practice, and watch myself and those that I love get older and for some pass on. Then I realized that tomorrow, November 2nd, is All Souls Day. This is the day when Christians pray for and remember those who have passed. And I thought about my brother who passed a year ago. I thought back to all the people I've known, all the things that I've done and seen, all the places I've been, and everything I've been through, both good and bad. And I really felt that sense of how quickly life passes you by. And if you're in your 40s or older, you know that feeling. 4 years ago, when my youngest daughter graduated from the 8th grade, she said to me, she said, "Dad, middle school went by so fast." And I wanted to tell her, honey, it just goes by faster and faster as you get older, but I didn't tell her that. She'll experience it herself. The singer Neil Diamond released a song in 1970 called Done Too Soon. Check it out. It's an interesting song. And that brings us to the title of today's podcast. Remember what you don't want to think about. Memento Mori. Memento Mori is Latin for remember that you will die. The idea and practice of memento mori goes back centuries to medieval times. It was the theory and reflection of mortality, especially as a means of considering the vanity of earthly life and the transient nature of all earthly goods and pursuits, and the idea that eventually everything will pass away. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is he talking about dying? Well, because it's an inescapable fact, yet something that we often choose to ignore or not think about. But there is no life without death. There is no real living without acknowledging that it will be done too soon. From the moment we're born, we have a relationship with death, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. And I would suggest to you that life is all the more precious if we can acknowledge and remember this. Doing so can give a person a grand perspective of one's life because we have a tendency to live in the certainty that tomorrow will be there, but it very well may not be there. Now, there's a lot of cliches that can be trotted out at this time, like live each day like it's your last, or it's not how we die, but how we live that matters. And I'm not going to trot that stuff out. I mean, all that stuff is good and it's true, but I like to stay focused on the two things that I know for sure. The only two things that I feel we can count on and know for sure. One is that I'm having an experience right now that I call life. And two, that this experience in this way, shape, and form won't last forever. And we don't need to be afraid of that fact. It doesn't need to make us depressed or anxious or fearful. We don't need to consider it morbid. It's just a fact. And I think knowing and remembering it can help us to be present to life happening now. We think that we flow through life, but in fact, life flows through us and it has its own plans. Here and now, that's all we have. Yet we can get so distracted by the regrets of the past, or we can spend a lot of time focusing on the future, worrying, planning, wondering what's going to happen. And while we're doing this, life is flowing through us and passing us by if we're not paying attention. And that's really all that life is, isn't it? It's the moment to moment experience of what's happening right in front of you, right here, right now. And if you think you've got all the time in the world, and you're spending a lot of your time worrying and regretting and stuck up in your head, then your life is passing you by. Remembering that someday you will shuffle off this mortal coil, as Shakespeare said, forces us to really appreciate and focus on the miracle of our life right now. Think about it. Your breath happens without you even having to think about it. Think about all the colors, shapes, sounds coming into your experience, even while you're asleep. Every day you wake up until you don't, but if you do, you get to do it all over again. You get to use the sun, the seed, the soil, and the rain to create something, to grow something, and you get to make it mean whatever you want it to. You get to use the life force within us while we have it to create a life. And that life it can include a life partner and children and a job, and it can have travel and family and fun and laughter and sadness. And it can have some of the most sublime things you'll ever experience, but only if you're paying attention. So, life is short. And I think we should realize that and acknowledge it. And I believe we owe it to ourselves to live life awake, aware, with eyes open, and really sucking the juice out of every moment right here, right now. When I was a little kid, about 5 years old, I remember asking my mom, "Mom, am I going to die?" And to her credit, she didn't sugarcoat it or lie. She said, "Yes, you will. Everybody dies." And I started to cry. I just started to cry. I said, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die." I just cried and cried. And she held me and she said, "It's okay. It's going to be okay." And maybe because of that experience and the courage and forthrightness of my mother, never had a problem with that idea. And if you do, I hope you can come to terms with it and use it to live the best life that you possibly can. I want to leave you with the idea that true freedom is the ability to be free from the past and free from the future, and to fully, wholly, and powerfully experience this present moment so that the time you do have is not only meaningful, but as good as you can make it. Here's today's quote by Seneca. the Stoic philosopher of ancient Rome, who said, "It is quality rather than quantity that matters. Life, if well lived, is long enough." If you're having some challenges thinking about this fact and you want to have a conversation about it, you know where to go, tedmoreno.com. Send me an email. I invite you to request a half-hour phone consultation. We'll talk about what's going on, and if you're ready, we'll make an appointment for your first hypnotherapy session. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Live today like it's all you've got, because today is all you've got. Thanks so much. Take good care. Bye now.